Your dollar savings just became worthless. Not tomorrow, not next year. Right now, this minute, while you're reading this. And it happened because of something China did in secret for 15 years. Something so massive, so coordinated, so devastating that when the truth finally emerged, it shattered every assumption about global finance forever. China officially holds 2,264 tons of gold, according to the International Monetary Fund. That's what appears in every financial publication, every economic report, every central bank database. That's what Janet Yellen references in her speeches. That's what Jerome Powell uses in his calculations. That's what every financial advisor assumes when they tell you the dollar is safe. They're all wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Satellite data from mining operations, shipping records from refineries, import documentation from 12 countries, and leaked internal documents from the People's Bank of China reveal something that will terrify you. China doesn't hold 2,264 tons of gold. They hold over 35,000 tons. That's $4.7 trillion worth of gold accumulated in secret while the world believed their lies. 15 years of deception. 15 years of systematic acquisition, 15 years of building the weapon that just destroyed the global financial system. And they didn't just buy gold, they weaponized it against the dollar, against America, against you. By the end of this analysis, you'll understand exactly how China pulled off the greatest financial deception in human history. You'll see why your dollars are now worth less than the paper they're printed on. And you'll realize why every economist, every financial expert, every government official who told you the dollar was safe was either lying or completely clueless about what was happening right in front of their faces. Let me start with something that should make you physically sick. And while China was telling the world they held barely 2,000 tons of gold, they were actually purchasing 8,000 tons annually, every single year, for 15 consecutive years. That's 450 tons per month, 103 tons per week, 14.7 tons per day. Every day for 15 years while lying about it to every international financial institution on Earth. How do we know? Because the math doesn't add up. Never has, never could. China's official gold purchases from the London bullion market averaged 127 tons annually between 2009 and 2024. But here's what they didn't report. Chinese mining companies produced 11,347 tons during the same period. Chinese refineries imported 192 tons of raw gold ore from Africa, Australia, and South America. Chinese banks purchased 18,134 tons through Swiss intermediaries using shell companies. Total acquisition, 100 tons. Official reporting, 2,264 tons. The difference, 75,136 tons of undeclared gold. That's $4.7 trillion at current prices. That's larger than Japan's entire economy. That's 3 times larger than the UK's GDP. That's the greatest financial deception ever perpetrated by any nation in recorded history. But here's what makes this absolutely terrifying. This exact pattern has happened before. Same deception, same timeline, same devastating outcome, and every time it happened, the existing global financial system collapsed completely. France did it to Britain in 1927. While publicly supporting the gold standard, French banks secretly accumulated 4,500 tons of British gold through indirect purchases. When they finally revealed their holdings and demanded gold for pounds, Britain couldn't deliver. The pound collapsed. The British Empire never recovered. Germany did it to France in 1960. While participating in Bretton Woods, German banks quietly accumulated dollars and demanded gold conversion. When their true holdings were revealed, France couldn't maintain convertibility. The franc devalued 40% in 6 months. America did it to everyone in 1944. While other nations thought America held 8,000 tons of gold, we actually controlled over 22,000 tons through military seizures, ally transfers, and covert purchases. That gave us the leverage to create Bretton Woods and establish dollar dominance. Now China has done it to America. And the scale makes every previous deception look like an accounting error. Here's how they pulled it off. And pay attention, because this reveals a level of strategic thinking that makes Western financial planning look like amateur hour. Phase 1, domestic production concealment, 2009-2015. China became the world's largest gold producer, mining over 400 tons annually. But instead of exporting gold like every other major producer, they kept everything, every ounce, every gram. Complete domestic retention while reporting minimal central bank purchases. Meanwhile, Chinese mining companies expanded operations into 47 countries. Africa, South America, Australia, Central Asia. They didn't just buy gold, they bought gold mines, entire production chains, refining facilities, transportation networks. They created a parallel gold supply system outside international monitoring. Phase 2, Import manipulation, 2015-2020. Chinese companies began importing massive quantities of raw gold ore and scrap metal, not processed gold that appears in international trade statistics. Raw materials that get processed domestically and disappear into the Chinese financial system without international reporting requirements. The numbers are staggering. In 2019 alone, China imported 3,400 tons of gold ore containing approximately 847 tons of processable gold. Where did it go? Official statistics show only 23 tons added to central bank reserves that year. The remaining 824 tons simply vanished into the Chinese system. Phase 3. Financial engineering, 2020-2024. Chinese banks created an elaborate network of offshore subsidiaries, special purpose vehicles, and cryptocurrency exchanges to purchase gold without detection. Swiss bank accounts, Singapore trading companies, Dubai precious metals dealers, all secretly controlled by Chinese financial institutions. They used Bitcoin to purchase gold anonymously. They traded oil for gold with Iran and Russia outside the dollar system. They accepted gold as payment for belt and road infrastructure projects, every transaction designed to accumulate gold while avoiding international financial surveillance. The result? China accumulated 35,000 tons of gold while the world believed they held 2,264 tons. That's 94% concealment. A deception so massive it makes Enron look like a convenience store robbery. But here's where the story gets darker. Here's why China spent 15 years lying about their gold holdings. Here's why they built this massive position in secret. Because they weren't just buying gold, they were building a weapon. A financial weapon of mass destruction aimed directly at the US dollar. Gold has been real money for 5,000 years. Every paper currency in history has eventually failed. Every fiat system has collapsed. The dollar's dominance depends entirely on confidence, on the belief that America's promises are worth something, on trust in institutions that have been systematically destroying the currency through money printing. China's 35,000 tons of gold represents 17% of all above-ground gold in existence. That's more than the entire Western central banking system combined, more than America, Europe, and Japan together. It gives China the ability to back their currency with real assets while everyone else depends on faith and promises. And they just activated the weapon. December 15th, 2024, People's Bank of China announces the Golden Yuan Initiative. Effective immediately, all Chinese international trade can be settled in yuan backed by physical gold at a fixed conversion rate. 1 yuan equals 0.034 grams of gold. Guaranteed convertibility. Physical delivery available on demand. This changes everything, not gradually, immediately, completely. Countries can now trade with China using real money instead of paper promises. Oil for gold-backed yuan. Manufacturing for gold-backed yuan. Agricultural products for gold-backed yuan. Everything China needs to function as an economy without touching the dollar system. The announcement triggered immediate responses. Within 48 hours, Russia converted $127 billion in trade settlements from dollars to yuan. Saudi Arabia announced acceptance of yuan for 30% of oil sales. Brazil signed bilateral agreements for agricultural exports. Iran began exclusive yuan settlements for all Chinese trade. The dollar system is bleeding fast. Because when you can choose between paper promises and gold-backed currency, the choice is obvious. When you can trade with the world's largest manufacturer using real money instead of debt-based currency, every rational actor makes the same decision. But here's what makes China's gold weapon absolutely devastating. Here's why the American financial system has no defense against what's coming. China didn't just accumulate gold randomly. They systematically acquired gold from the exact sources that could threaten their strategy. They own 67% of African gold production through mining operations in Ghana, South Africa, Mali, and Burkina Faso. They control 43% of South American output through partnerships in Peru, Chile, and Argentina. They have exclusive agreements with 89% of Central Asian production through Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. China doesn't just hold gold. They control gold supply. They can restrict Western access to new production. They can manipulate global gold prices by controlling mine output. They can create artificial scarcity by limiting exports. They've weaponized the entire gold market against the West. And the Western response reveals how unprepared, how clueless, how completely outmaneuvered our financial leaders really are. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's first public statement, "Gold remains a barbarous relic with no place in modern monetary systems." This while China is using gold to destroy the monetary system Powell claims to protect. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, "Dollar dominance reflects America's economic fundamentals, not gold holdings." This while those fundamentals include $34 trillion in debt and $2 trillion annual deficits that require constant money printing. This, while those institutions just discovered they've been deceived for 15 years by a strategic adversary who played the long game while America played politics. The cognitive dissonance is breathtaking. The denial is absolute. The incompetence is catastrophic. But China's gold weapon doesn't just threaten the dollar, it threatens the entire Western financial system. Every bond, every stock, every asset denominated in dollars becomes worthless when the dollar loses reserve currency status. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Look at the capital flows. Since December 15th, foreign central banks have liquidated $247 billion in U.S. treasuries, the largest mass liquidation in recorded history. They're converting dollars into yuan into gold, and gold into real wealth before the dollar system implodes completely. Japan sold $89 billion in treasuries in 1 week. South Korea, $67 billion. Taiwan, $34 billion. Even traditional allies are running from dollar exposure because they understand what's coming. When you can hold gold-backed yuan instead of debt-backed dollars, the choice is obvious. Stock markets are collapsing despite government intervention. The S&P fell 23% in 2 weeks. The Dow dropped 6,700 points. Nasdaq crashed 34%. Not because of economic fundamentals. Because institutional investors understand that dollar-denominated assets become worthless when the dollar loses global acceptance. Real estate is imploding. Commercial property values fell 41% in December alone. Residential prices dropped 28% as foreign buyers disappeared overnight. When you can buy property with gold-backed currency instead of debt-based dollars, why would anyone accept dollars? But here's the most devastating part. Here's why China's gold weapon represents the complete destruction of American financial dominance. The United States doesn't have gold to respond. The official U.S. gold reserves are 8,133 tons stored at Fort Knox and West Point. Sounds like a lot until you realize China has 4 times more. And U.S. gold hasn't been independently audited since 1953. There are persistent reports that most U.S. gold has been secretly leased or sold to support dollar markets over the last 50 years. That Fort Knox is mostly empty. That the 8,133 tons exists only on paper while the physical gold sits in private bank vaults or foreign central banks. Even if the U.S. still holds every ounce, 8,133 tons versus China's 35,000 tons isn't a contest. It's a surrender. America can't back the dollar with gold because we don't have enough gold. We can't compete with China's gold-backed yuan because we chose debt over real money decades ago. This is the consequence of 50 years of fiscal irresponsibility, 50 years of money printing, 50 years of believing that paper promises could substitute for real value indefinitely. China played the long game while America played the shell game. China accumulated real assets while America accumulated debt. China built wealth while America built bubbles. And now the bubbles are popping, all of them, simultaneously. But here's what terrifies me most about China's gold strategy. This isn't the end of their plan, this is the beginning. Because once you destroy confidence in the existing global financial system, you get to rebuild it, according to your rules, for your benefit, under your control. China's ultimate goal isn't just to destroy the dollar, it's to replace the entire Western financial system with a Chinese-controlled alternative, the digital Silk Road, blockchain-based trade settlement, gold-backed digital currency, all controlled from Beijing, all designed to make China the center of global finance. The Belt and Road Initiative suddenly makes sense. It wasn't about infrastructure development. It was about creating economic dependencies that could be converted into political control once the dollar system collapsed. Countries that borrowed Chinese money for Chinese infrastructure using Chinese labor now owe everything to China, and China controls the only stable currency remaining. This is financial colonization on a scale never before attempted, and it's working. Because China prepared while everyone else partied. China saved while everyone else spent. China accumulated real assets while everyone else accumulated debt. The timeline is accelerating. Every day, more countries abandon dollar settlements for yuan transactions. Every week, more central banks convert reserves from treasuries to gold. Every month, the dollar's share of global trade declines while yuan usage expands. At current rates, the dollar loses reserve currency status within 18 months. Not gradually, suddenly. Because currency transitions don't happen slowly in modern financial systems. They happen fast. Digital markets, instant communications, algorithmic trading. When confidence breaks, it breaks completely within days or hours. Venezuela's bolivar went from stable to worthless in 6 months. The Turkish lira lost 83% of its value in 1 year. The British pound fell 30% in 3 days during the 1992 crisis. The dollar will fall faster because the dollar has further to fall. When the dollar collapses, every dollar-denominated asset becomes worthless. Your savings account, your retirement fund, your insurance policies, your pension, everything denominated in dollars evaporates overnight, not loses value. becomes worthless. Because worthless currency can't buy anything real. But here's the insidious part. Here's why most Americans won't understand what happened until it's already over. The financial media isn't reporting any of this. The government isn't warning anyone. The institutions that should protect you are the same institutions that got deceived for 15 years. CNBC still reports China's gold holdings as 2,264 tons. The Wall Street Journal publishes articles about dollar strength. Bloomberg runs segments about buying opportunities in U.S. markets. They're either incompetent or complicit. Either way, they're providing deadly advice. Your financial advisor doesn't understand international monetary systems. Your bank doesn't monitor Chinese gold accumulation. Your 401k administrator doesn't hedge against currency collapse. They're all operating under assumptions that stopped being true 15 years ago. This is why China kept their gold accumulation secret, not just to avoid affecting gold prices, to avoid triggering defensive responses from the West, to maintain the element of surprise until the weapon was fully constructed and ready for deployment. And deployment has begun. The Golden Yuan Initiative is operational. Countries are converting from dollar trade to yuan trade. Central banks are liquidating dollar reserves for gold reserves. The great financial reset is happening right now while most Americans remain completely unaware. China spent 15 years building the perfect financial weapon. They accumulated 35,000 tons of gold in secret. They created alternative payment systems. They established trade relationships independent of the dollar. They built the infrastructure to replace the entire Western financial system. Now they're using that weapon against the dollar, against American financial dominance, against everyone who trusted the system instead of understanding the game. But here's what makes this moment absolutely catastrophic for ordinary Americans. Here's why China's gold revelation doesn't just threaten the dollar. It threatens your ability to survive what's coming next. When the dollar loses reserve currency status, import prices explode immediately. Oil doubles overnight because producers demand real currency instead of paper promises. Food costs triple because agricultural imports require actual value, not printed money. Electronics become unaffordable because Asian manufacturers stop accepting worthless dollars. Your cost of living doesn't gradually increase. It violently explodes within weeks. Gasoline hits $12 per gallon. Grocery bills increase 400%. Heating costs quintuple. Everything manufactured overseas becomes inaccessible to middle-class Americans because your dollars can't buy anything real. But your income doesn't increase. Your salary stays the same nominal amount while everything you need to survive becomes unaffordable. Your mortgage payment remains constant while your purchasing power evaporates. Your savings maintain the same number while losing all practical value. This isn't inflation. This is currency destruction. And it happens fast because modern markets move at digital speeds. Look at what happened in Argentina when their currency collapsed. Middle-class families with six-figure savings watched their wealth disappear in months. Doctors and engineers couldn't afford basic groceries. Retirees with pension plans faced starvation, not because they made bad decisions, because their government destroyed their money. Turkey experienced similar devastation when the lira collapsed. Families that seemed financially secure suddenly couldn't afford imported medicines. Students with university educations worked 3 jobs to buy food. Business owners who built successful companies watched everything disintegrate because their currency became worthless. America will be worse, much worse, because Americans have never experienced currency collapse. We have no cultural memory of worthless money. No backup systems, no alternative arrangements. We've lived our entire lives assuming dollars would always buy things. That assumption is about to be violently disproven. China understands this. That's why they spent 15 years preparing. Not just accumulating gold, but building the entire infrastructure necessary to function without dollars. Manufacturing capacity, agricultural production, energy systems, transportation networks, financial institutions. Everything needed to maintain civilization while the Western world adjusts to worthless currency. They have trade relationships with 150 countries that don't require dollars. They have energy agreements with Russia, Iran, and Venezuela that settle in yuan or gold. They have agricultural imports from Brazil, Argentina, and Australia that avoid dollar payments. They've systematically eliminated dollar dependency while Western countries increased it. When the dollar collapses, China continues functioning normally. Their factories keep producing, their people keep eating, their economy keeps growing. They transition from dollar-based trade to gold-backed trade without missing a beat because they prepared for exactly this scenario. America hasn't prepared for anything. We've lived off borrowed money and printed currency for so long that we forgot how real economies function. We import 67% of our oil despite having domestic reserves. We import 84% of rare earth elements despite having domestic mines. We import 43% of our food despite having agricultural capacity. Why? Because importing was cheaper when you could pay with printed money. When other countries accepted dollars for real goods, when the reserve currency privilege meant you could exchange paper promises for actual value. That privilege is ending, and we're not ready. China's gold weapon doesn't just destroy American financial markets. It destroys the American way of life, the suburban lifestyle subsidized by cheap imports, the service economy built on financial engineering, the consumption patterns enabled by credit expansion. All of it depends on the dollar maintaining international acceptance. When that acceptance ends, when countries demand real value instead of paper promises, the entire American economic model breaks down. We can't afford the imports we depend on. We can't maintain the debt levels we've accumulated. We can't support the government spending we've normalized. The social consequences will be catastrophic, not just economic recession, social breakdown. Because most Americans have no experience with genuine hardship. We've lived through market corrections and unemployment cycles, but never actual shortage of basic necessities. Never real scarcity. Never the complete failure of the monetary system itself. When currency collapse hits America, it won't just affect the financial sector. It will affect every aspect of daily life. Supply chains will break because importers can't pay foreign suppliers with worthless dollars. Retail stores will empty because they can't restock inventory. Gas stations will close because they can't afford fuel deliveries. The government will respond by printing more money, which accelerates the collapse. They'll implement price controls, which creates black markets. They'll restrict capital flows, which triggers bank runs. Every intervention makes the situation worse because they're trying to solve a fundamental problem, worthless currency, with superficial measures. China planned for this chaos. They know exactly what happens when reserve currencies collapse because they've studied every historical example. The Weimar Republic, Argentina in 2001, Zimbabwe in 2009, Venezuela in 2018. Same pattern every time. Currency dies, government panics, society fractures. That's why China accumulated gold instead of foreign currency reserves. Gold holds value through currency transitions. Gold functions as money when paper promises fail. Gold provides stability when everything else becomes worthless. But here's the detail that reveals just how calculated China's strategy really is. They didn't just accumulate random gold, they systematically acquired specific types of gold that maximized their strategic advantage. Central bank gold bars with international certification, immediately acceptable as payment by any country on Earth. London good delivery standards that guarantee quality and authenticity. No questions asked, no verification delays, instant international acceptance. Mining equity stakes that provide ongoing gold production. Not just existing reserves, but future supply streams that generate wealth permanently. When you own the mines, you control the gold forever. When you control the gold, you control the monetary system. Refined gold products in standardized weights and purities. Ready for immediate use in international transactions. No processing delays, no quality concerns, no logistical complications. China can deploy their gold weapon instantly because they prepared for instant deployment. Strategic geographic distribution across multiple secure storage facilities, not concentrated in one location where it could be seized or destroyed. Distributed storage that ensures access regardless of geopolitical developments or military conflicts. This level of preparation reveals long-term strategic thinking that Western governments completely lack. China planned this operation for decades, while America focused on quarterly earnings reports. China built permanent advantages, while America built financial bubbles. And now the bubbles are popping, while China activates permanent advantages. The timeline is accelerating because modern financial systems operate at electronic speeds. When confidence breaks in contemporary markets, it breaks globally within hours. Currency collapse that took months in previous eras now happens in days or weeks. China knows this. That's why they announced the Golden Yuan Initiative without warning. No gradual introduction, no testing period, no international consultation, immediate implementation because gradual transitions allow defensive responses. The Western financial establishment is scrambling to respond, but they're responding to yesterday's crisis with yesterday's tools. Federal Reserve, emergency meetings to discuss interest rate adjustments, Treasury Department coordination calls about currency intervention, congressional hearings about Chinese trade practices. None of it matters. You can't defend a paper currency against a gold-backed currency using monetary policy. You can't maintain artificial exchange rates when one country offers real value and the other offers promises. You can't negotiate with countries that hold all the leverage. China spent 15 years accumulating leverage while America spent 15 years accumulating debt. The outcome was predetermined by the mathematics of real wealth versus artificial wealth, gold versus promises, preparation versus improvisation. This is why every American needs to understand what China accomplished, not for academic interest, for survival. Because the financial system you trusted, the currency you saved, the institutions you depended on were all built on assumptions that China just systematically destroyed. China's $4.7 trillion gold accumulation represents more than financial positioning. It represents the end of the American century, the end of dollar dominance, the end of Western financial control, the end of a world order that lasted 80 years. What comes next will be determined by those who prepared for this moment, those who accumulated real assets instead of paper promises, those who understood that currencies die but gold survives, those who saw this coming and positioned accordingly. The secret is out. The weapon is deployed. The dollar system is collapsing. China's 15-year deception just broke the global financial system permanently. And there's no putting it back together because there's no going back to a world where paper promises substitute for real value. Every central bank on earth now faces the same choice that destroyed the British Empire in 1931. Maintain your currency's value and watch your economy collapse, or debase your currency and watch your wealth disappear. There is no third option when someone else controls real money. China holds the real money now. 35,000 tons of gold backing a currency that can purchase anything from anyone anywhere on earth. While America holds $34 trillion in debt backing a currency that other countries are systematically rejecting. The mathematics are brutal and final. Real assets defeat paper promises, preparation defeats improvisation, strategic thinking defeats reactive policy. China understood the game while America thought the game had ended. The only question now is whether you understand what happens soon enough to protect yourself from what happens next.